Currently, many of you are being challenged by budgeting your time at home between sleep, school, work, family, friends, and leisure. I know both my wife and I certainly work hard every day to budget time and balance between working out, doing schoolwork, watching Boardwalk Empire, prepping meals, spending time with the Bengals, and entertaining myself. Sometimes when we get stuck, stepping back and budgeting our situation can help us get our wheels turning again. So that said, this week's theme goes back to level one when you think about trade-offs and opportunity costs. In this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through a not so unimaginable scenario and the idea of budgeting. So here we go. So in this case study, students learn the basics of budgeting from setting priorities, and we're going to create a savings goal and track some spending and learn about some trade-offs required to achieve the financial goals here. And we'll take on a role of a friend providing financial advice to another friend and learn to develop various options and strategies to achieve our budgeting goals. So the title of this tutorial is How Do I Budget? So the story goes like this. All of Sharon's friends know who to turn to if they have money questions. Sharon attributes her financial savvy to the summer jobs she has held over the past 4 years. These jobs have helped her save a few $1,000s for college to minimize her student loans. Her friend Alana approaches her the summer before their senior year of high school, confessing she has a whopping $56.47 saved for college, even after working part-time jobs for the past 3 years. Alana asks Sharon what she could do to manage her money more effectively. Sharon's answer is one word: budget. Sharon asks Alana to describe her goals and current spending habits, and Alana responds in the following way. College costs a lot more than I thought, and my parents expect me to pay for my living expenses on campus. Those are going to be around $3,000 per year. I'm used to working a part-time job and going to school, but I'm not sure I can handle both anymore. Budgeting seems like a great idea, but where do I start? So we'll start by answering this. Alana has only $56.47 saved for college. Some possible reasons why she's only managed to save this much, and I jotted down a couple things already so you can see they're pre-printed there. One, clearly she's not committed to saving that money. There is no plan in place to put dollars away before she even gets her paycheck. Um, Two, maybe she's eating out at restaurants with friends more often than needs to, and maybe she's going to Caribou every day and buying a little too much. Um, Perhaps she's spending a lot of money on gas if she's driving her friends around. And also, something that I think is probably the case for a lot of high school students is this realization that there should be $3,000 there might be the first negative consequence of overspending the money that comes in. So when we look at what should her goals be, well, she's going to need to, I think, put a set amount of each paycheck for savings. In other words, this concept of paying yourself first is one of the most important principles of saving money, building wealth, and setting yourself up for your future. And the other thing she's going to need to do is examine her spending habits to find some saving opportunities, because clearly she's going through the money that she's earning right now, not having the opportunity to save, and so she's going to have to cut some spending. And are there some ways that Alana can get a better understanding of her spending patterns? Well, she could keep a daily spending log as a way of just tracking what she's spending and save the receipts if she uses cash a lot. Another option would be put all her paychecks that she gets for her job directly into the bank and spend only with a debit card. And then that way it's easier to track the spending habits. And I think for some people, they find that they limit their spending a little more if they don't have cash in their pockets or purses or wallets. Another thing, and as technology keeps moving forward, I think this becomes more and more available and accessible and probably beneficial for high school students is looking online for a budgeting or savings type of app out there. There are plenty of them. I don't have a specific one off the top of my head, but we could go in certainly and find something there. Um, So Sharon develops a basic plan for Alana to track every dollar she spends over the course of a month, and Alana collects her receipts in a shoebox and reviews them with Sharon at the end of the month. And what we find with her spending is she went and had 10 lattes at $4 each. That month, she went to 3 movies that cost $10 each. She, as far as food was concerned, went out with her friends 4 times for a meal that was about $12 each. Had 20 different instances where she spent money on snacks or energy drinks that run about $3 each. As far as clothing is concerned, she took 3 trips to the mall with friends and spent $30 per trip. Car insurance. Her parents do ask her to pay $70 a month towards her policy in exchange for being able to drive the family car. She also fills up the car with gas a couple times a month, so there's $35 a fill. And as far as her cell phone's concerned, her parents expect her to pay $36 a month towards the family plan. And lastly, this month she went out and bought a pair of shoes at $60. So to help make sense of all this information, Sharon asks Alana to organize the information by using a budget template that's provided below. And in the category column, she's going to need to list her various expenses. She's going to then make a judgment call about whether each expense is a want or a need. Now the difference, a want clearly is something that you'd like to have but isn't necessary. A need is something that is a non-negotiable and you have to have it. In the monthly cost column, she's going to total up her costs of the expenses, and then in the last column, she's going to calculate how much that item is as a percentage of her total costs. And this should help her determine where she spends most of her money, at least in this past month. So I already completed the chart below. So as far as coffee is concerned, I'd categorize that as a want, not necessarily a need. And it cost her $40 for the month, which was 8% of her total costs. And the movies, she went to 3 of them. She spent $30 there. Again, a want, not a need. And that ended up being about 6% of her total costs. Now, where am I getting this from? Her total costs, I added up at the bottom, $504 what she spent for the month. And then you just do some simple division there to figure out the percent. With $40 is what percent of 504. And so that's where that came from. The highlights and the pink dots, I'll explain that a little later on here. Next, we have food, and I say you could dispute between wanting and needing with food. I'd say food's a necessity, so in some senses it's a need, but what kind of food you're spending it on and how often you're going out is probably a want. So there's 108 she spent there. It was 21% of her total spending. Perhaps there's an opportunity for her to save some money there. She's not going to cut out food spending altogether, but maybe having 21% of her budget going for it is a bit too much. In terms of clothing, same deal. You definitely need to have clothes, and I think what she may have to look at is cutting her clothing budget down a little bit, and maybe it's just a replacement. Like if some clothes wear out and she has to replace them, then by all means get new ones, but rather than just adding to her already plentiful armada of clothing, she might be able to save some money there. Car insurance could be a need or a want. One of the things that we don't know about in this story and could be pretty important is if she lives 20 miles away from town and nobody lives close to her, she's going to have to drive to go to work, to get to school perhaps, or see friends. So it could be a need versus a want, but that's $70 and 14% of her budget. And then right along with that, gas would fall in that same category as maybe it is a need versus a want. The cell phone bill, some would argue that that is a want and not a need, but again, depending upon if that's the only method of communication that she has, they don't have a landline at home, then it might be more of a need than a want. Times are changing in the way that some of the old assignments that we see in our classes being designed might be designed with early 2000s technology in mind and not necessarily 2020. Anyway, her cost is $36. The percent of that is 7%. And then lastly, her purchase of a pair of shoes for $60. Perhaps that was just a replacement of an old pair that wore out. Maybe she doesn't buy a set of shoes every month, but that could be something that she could cut her spending. So when you add it up, she earned $504. Or no, sorry, she didn't earn it. She spent that much in a month, and that makes up 100% of her spending. So Alana's reaction after completing this process is the following. Wait a second, Sharon. I think my boss is ripping me off. I work 15 hours a week on an average at $11 per hour. According to my receipts above, I'm spending much less per month than I'm earning. But as we've already established, I've only got $56 saved up from 3 years of working. What gives? How do I file a complaint? How do I get my money back? Wait until I report this boss of mine. I'm putting this on social media. And Sharon can tell that Alana's angry, but she's pretty sure her boss isn't stealing money from her. So we'll do some quick math and compare how Alana should be making her per month, how much she should be making per month, and compare it to how much she's actually spending to determine why Alana's concerned. Well, if we take what she told us, she works about 15 hours a week at $11 per hour, and there's about 4 weeks in a month. If we multiply that out, it comes to $660. Now that 660 is her gross pay, and that means that it's pre-tax. So the government hasn't taken the withholding yet for income tax, nor have they pulled out the Social Security tax, which is dollars that actually gets held for Alana when she actually gets to retirement. So somewhere down the line, many, many years from now, she will get some of that back, but she doesn't get to spend it now. So 660 is what she brings home. Her spending is $504. So that's a difference of 156. But when you think about the taxes withheld, Social Security withheld, it's probably a little bit less than that $156 difference. And there could be other things that are deducted from a paycheck too. Sometimes businesses will deduct uniform costs if you have to wear one, but they're asking you to buy one. Sometimes, depending on your job, if you're in a unionized job, you may have to pay a union due per month, or you can pay it per year. But maybe she has that taken out of her check monthly too. So there can be some different deductions that get taken. So that's what it says here. The missing money is likely due to taxes and other deductions. It's possible that her spending also could be varying from month to month. Maybe some of the other months she spent a lot more than what her gross pay was. And so like in a month like this where she made it up, there's other months where it was already gone. So once Sharon lends some clarity on Alana's pay, she feels a little bit better, and she's still really worried about her initial problem. She says, this is going to be extremely difficult for me to cut anything. I mean, I'm working hard, and I think I deserve to enjoy the money that I earn. To save that $3,000 for college, I basically need to work an extra 25 hours per month. It's my senior year of high school. I need to focus on my grades and apply to college. I am so confused. Sharon thinks back to where their conversation started last month and how Alana seemed lost, and she hoped that having Alana prioritize her goals and review her spending would help her gain some necessary perspective. But Sharon realizes Alana's at a dead end, so her next idea is to outline a few options for her so she can choose a solution that'll work best for her. So what 2 to 3 options could be outlined for Alana to help her achieve her goals? And so we'll look at pros and cons here. And what thing that I see it's important with budgeting is, first, when you have a problem, you have to break it down. So she's looking at needing to get $3,000. So in order to save that in a year, because that's the amount of time she has, she's going to need to average saving about $250 a month. When you look at her gross pay of $500, that's almost 40% of what her gross pay is. And her gross pay is actually, what, $600 and some dollars. So the question is, how does she come up with that 40%? Where does that come from? And this is where I have this pink dot. I'm going to slide back up here to this chart, and let's look at some of these percentages. So in terms of coffee, could we cut the coffee spending out? Probably. Maybe she could make coffee at home. Maybe her parents will even supply the coffee so she wouldn't have to spend on it. And that would save 8% of her budget right there. She could do the same with movies for a while. Maybe cut movies out. As hard as that may be, that's another 6%. So now we're at 14. Perhaps with the food, if she's not going out as often with her friends or buying those snacks and energy drinks, she might be able to knock down a good 6 to 8% off of her food costs as well. So if we're at 14 and we add 6 more percent to that, we'd be saving 20% of that. Her clothing, if she can reduce that clothing budget down to say, I'm not going to buy any new clothes unless something wears out, she could probably get that down 18%. She might be able to knock all 18 off if she has a lot of clothes already. So now we're at 38%. And then the shoes, if she has other shoes that she can wear, she could be at 50%. So she would be 50% of that 504 is $250. So that would be one recommendation to her, to look at it and think about her spending that way. Now, maybe if she doesn't have to drive, she could look at cutting some spending with car insurance. Maybe she doesn't need to drive if she has friends that can do it. And she could offer them gas money, but maybe she wouldn't even be spending as much on gas. So there's more than one way to do this. So the pink dots that I just put out there were one way that you could look at it. So let's go back down. Another thing that she's going to need to do is start a savings account. And having an auto direct deposit would be the most highly recommended way to do that. So you get your paycheck, it goes into the bank, and you may even think about a secondary account where money is withdrawn from your debit account or your savings account and put right into a separate savings account that you don't touch. So that way you're paying yourself first. Maybe with her job, if she's been doing it for a long time, she's been doing good. She could approach her boss about a raise. Maybe she is due for one, and that could help her. Or maybe she needs to start looking for another job that pays more and she can get the same hours. So these are some different options for her that I think she could consider for her dilemma, and that is saving $3,000. So again, this is a real life problem that she has. Budgeting, or really breaking things down piece by piece and analyzing what her habits are, can help her. The next thing that we're going to ask you to do is to play a game, and the game is going to put you in a situation where you are an adult. So fast forward yourself in time, and you've got a family to care for, and we're in economic hard times, and so you're going to be presented with uh, a lot of scenarios day by day over the course of a month. Can you get your family to survive? And you got to think about your spending habits and what's necessary versus what is not necessary. The name of the game is called Spent. There is a link to it in this page on the budgeting intro. There's also the URL for it is in the directions here, which is the follow-up form that is in our folder called Spent. And it's going to ask you to look at part 1 in yellow here before you play. It says over 14 million Americans are unemployed. Now imagine you're one of them. Your savings are gone. You've lost your house and you're down to your last $1,000. Can you make it through the month? And so it's going to ask you, how do you feel about that situation? And do you think you can live with for 30 days with $1,000? You go ahead and explain that. There's a little pro tip for you here about playing the game. That's in pink. And then I'm going to ask that after you go to playspent.org, and please play it twice. The first time I played it, I made it through 22 days, so it's not easy, right? Even in some of the things they might know how to do it may not luck out. The second time through, I was able to make it through with about $300 to spare, but I didn't have much to show for it, and I think I was probably in danger of not being able to make rent the next month. So it is difficult, but we just want you to get a feel for making budgetary decisions. And then after you play the game a couple of times, then I want you to fill out these responses to these questions in part 3. And that's going to be your assessment for budgeting for this week. So you have a tutorial, you have a game to play, you have some questions to respond to. Next week, we're going to take a look at investing. And then our last week of the course, we're going to look at insurance and building credit. So I felt personal finance would be the most important thing for you guys to study the rest of the month here. So good luck, and make sure you ask questions if you have questions on Spent or budgeting.